This is the Voice of Early Childhood podcast. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Voice of Early Childhood podcast. My name is Angelica Solitska, and I'm joined by Carmela Garcia Manas, who is headmistress of Miss Daisy's Chelsea and PhD researcher at the University of Dundee in Scotland. So thank you once again, Carmela, for joining for maybe the fourth or fifth time. We were just talking about how we kind of confused how many episodes this is in now in your series.
It's quite a long journey, I must say. And so thesis, but yes, I believe it's the fifth now, if I'm not mistaken. And I'm very happy to be here again with you, Angelica.
Brilliant. And it's great to have you. And so far, just as a little recap, in the series around your PhD research into education for social sustainability through socio-dramatic play, you've discussed the context of your research in that first episode, and then the three themes so far have been poverty and race, children's understanding of power dynamics and possession of power, possessions as a form of power, and then social norms and subordination. And then this episode, we'll be discussing the essential skills for social sustainability. So I'm really interested to find out, what are these essential skills that have emerged from your research?
Yeah, so looking at the data, I have observed that there are three main skills that children have used during the social drama sessions. And these are creative and critical thinking, empathy, and negotiation skills.
Okay.
And there are three of them very interested indeed, and sometimes they are somehow interconnected, as everything in this thesis, especially negotiation and creative and critical thinking, as the children were presented with unjust scenarios, as you know, through the social drama sessions, and that also involved some problem solving skills. And that links beautifully with the creative and critical thinking and negotiation as well. And so empathy, we will see that later.
So throughout your research, you've seen all these different skills kind of come out, and children display these skills in different ways and through the different socio-drama sessions. So what was, like, I guess, what was the first theme, and did it come out did you identify it whilst you were researching, or was it more so when you've done like your thematic analysis, or your analysis of your findings, or was it obvious straight away?
It wasn't. I mean, perhaps there were skills that were more obvious than the others. For example, creative and critical thinking was more obvious, and to be honest, it was expected to some extent, because again, the children were in situations where they had to find solutions to the problems exposed, to them. So you expect somehow, or you can perhaps think of creative and critical thinking skills as one of the main skills that will come up during the sessions. However, one thing that surprised me when looking through the data, because it's all about creating common patterns. I use, as you say, thematic analysis. And that means that the findings come from the analysis of the data. So the children are the ones who provide me with the data and decide the themes somehow through the actions, so behaviors, words, acts, and so on, and decisions, of course. And indeed, as I said, creative and critical thinking was perceived from the very first session. But I couldn't imagine how complex the negotiation skills, or creative and critical thinking skills, even empathy skills, how complex could they become by the end of the program? So, which shows that there is a need for us to, as educators, to nurture these skills from an early age. It's true they are there. But it's true that we also have to provide them with opportunities to nurture these. So I've seen a change in terms of complexity, in terms of sophistication somehow, when looking at these skills throughout the program, throughout the sessions.
Mm. And how do these skills really link to social sustainability? I know we've discussed them not as explicitly in the previous episodes, but for those who are listening who may be kind of new to the concept of social sustainability and who may not think of sustainability in that social way or economic way and more the environmental aspects, how do these skills relate perhaps even like to the SDGs as well?
Yeah, well, these skills, especially in early childhood education, they link to in so many different ways. So first of all, by giving the children the opportunity to develop these creative and critical thinking, empathy, and negotiation skills, you are giving them a chance and opportunity to express their opinions, their points of views, to
Mm-hmm.
develop the cause and effect, and for them to test ideas and try different ideas. And UNESCO, in fact, there's a document in UNESCO that is linked to the Sustainable Development Goals,
Mm-hmm.
that indeed mentions how important creative and critical thinking is in sustainability and to develop these skills, not only on young children, but also through the learning journey, so primary, secondary, and even higher education. I have a couple of examples that may also show how these develop throughout the program, and that way, if I share this with you, I think it would be easier for all of you to see how much this is related to not only sustainability as the three dimensions, but also to social sustainability.
Yeah, yes, please.
Like that. So, for example, we have at the very end, we have at the start of the program, we had this first session where the children were asked to take their shoes off, put them in the shop, and then go and find a job to do. And they come up with different jobs. So one was a chef, police, dragon, so completely, almost completely made up. The other one chose to be a builder. The other one a pilot, and so on. And they started role playing different type of jobs. Yeah, which also shows creative skills. Yeah, they have to find, they have to create their own roles and then play them. When they finished working, they came for the salary, and I gave them the salary based on their clothes. And it was completely spontaneous, but I wanted them to understand that sometimes things that are completely external to you, unfortunately, um, um, influence each other's decisions. In this case,
Yeah.
I gave the children who were wearing stripy socks just £1 instead of two. So when they went to the shop, they could only buy one shoe. And then by the end, we met at circle time, and some of them were holding three shoes, some of them two shoes, and just a few of them one shoe. But they needed to go outside. We needed to go and play. It was time to go outside and enjoy a little bit of outdoors time. And then I asked them, say, do you think this is fair? And they said, no, this is not fair. Why is not fair? Because I have one and just three, and I have work, and you don't like my stripy socks. And we'll talk about this more deeply and more in depth in the next episode. But I asked them I asked them if they could make this situation fairer, and I pretended to leave the room just to give them some space to discuss. And that's when the negotiation process started. One of the children stood up and said, "Can I have my shoe?" And then the other child said, yes. And then the child gave the shoe. And then I observed how after 30 seconds in silence, another child mirroring this negotiation, because it's negotiation in a simple manner. This negotiation still stood up and said exactly the same words, seeing the success of the friend, that had 30 seconds before. And so he also asked for his shoe back to another friend. But this friend said, no, I don't want to give it to you. And then another child in the group stood up and said, you need to give it to him because it's his. Look, he has only one. And so they start, this gives you an example, then it continues until they all end up with shoes. So they made it fair. It took 5 minutes for them to negotiate, to perhaps learn from each other as well, because it was just this child who stood up and asked for the shoe. And that was somehow what incited other children to do the same and ask and replicate these exact words. And this also shows the power of social learning in developing negotiation skills, because you learn from each other. And you not only learn, but you contribute to the learning journey. And the teacher is not there. Now, this form of negotiation that was or started during the program, and I have other examples in week 2, week 3, started in a very simple manner, became more sophisticated by the end of the program. For example, in session 8, the children engaged in a conversation after discovering that the house was had been knocked down. And the children had to find a house. They were holding their pillows. They needed a place to go to sleep in and food. And so I asked the children, what can we do? Look at our house. It has been demolished. We'll have to find a new house. And then the children started among them sharing different ideas, perspectives. And this dialogue, this conversation they maintained for 30 seconds. It was absolutely beautiful and sophisticated. One child said, oh, we can sleep in the train. And then the other child responded to the child, listening to the child's perspective and opinion. No, we cannot sleep in the train because it moves. It will move. And then the other child says, well, we can go to Italy. I have a home there. So again, bringing that learning from home and sharing that awareness. And then another child said, oh, we can go back to the classroom and sleep there and pretend the other classroom is our bedroom. So this shows that these negotiation skills somehow became more sophisticated by the end. I think because they became more familiarized with the role play, with the in general, but also they had some experience at negotiating. They had some experience at meeting all together and talking between each other and sharing perspectives, points of views, and realizing as well that this is not an individual problem. It's a group problem. It's a group issue. And so every sustainable issue is not an individual problem. It's a group problem. So it has to be solved as a group all together.
That's a really good point. And it makes me think of implications for practice in terms of what you mentioned in the last episode. You don't necessarily have to create these scenarios. You can support children's learning of these skills every single day through normal day-to-day play and learning and routines. So in terms of what you're saying here, it's really important for children to be encouraged to problem solve and to negotiate by allowing them that opportunity naturally. So really the adult not just stepping in and solving a problem instantly and, giving a solution, actually allowing children the time and space to come to problem solve together. Like you say, it's a collective issue, and to come to some kind of consensus to undergo those challenges rather than the adult solving an issue to avoid any kind of confrontation or anyone getting upset. It's actually about allowing them that time and space.
Yes, I completely agree. I think we should be able to provide them with plenty of opportunities and also actively listen to them. Sometimes as adults, perhaps we lack of that creativity. Yeah, that is inherent in us, as you can see in young children, and we look at problems as having only a possible single solution. And children do not look at the world that way. Children look at the world and at an issue or a problem through different perspectives, and they have different solutions. And just because it's not the solution we expect or we think is right, that doesn't make it less valid. So it's very important for us to also listen to them and take into account what they're saying and see if that works. And this takes me back to one of the sessions when a child, and just remembering this, I don't have it on my notes, but I remember an episode where I was explaining to the children, I was telling them the difference between a family without a house. I was showing them 2 pictures, one of a drawings, one of a family without shoes and without a house, and the other one of a family with a 4-store house and shoes, garden, swimming pool, and so on. And I look at them and I ask them, what do you think we can do? Do you think this is fair? And then they say, no, I don't think it's fair. But that's a yes and no question. So again, we need an open-ended question. So what do you think we can do? And then they were very active. They were very keen. They were very enthusiastic. I remember them giving me plenty of solutions. Like, for example, they can come to my house and sleep in my house, or why they don't share the house, which was the most common response. And then another child raised his hand and said, I think we should swap them. And this is
interesting.
This is very interesting. We wouldn't think of it as a possible solution in the real world. What are you going to do? You are going to swap those 2 families. How is that going to solve the problem? But if you think of it, if we follow what this child proposed, which is swapping the family with the huge house and the shoes, and put them in a situation where there is no house and they have no shoes, and vice versa, perhaps what we can, although it's not flexible again, but perhaps what it may happen is that that family that had no house can see that it is a possibility to have a house. And the family that has a huge house can also feel what it's like not to have a house or not to have shoes. So of course, this is not doable in real life, but makes you think as an adult. And again, I think that by providing with these opportunities, we are not only teaching them and developing these skills that are incredibly important in terms of sustainability and in real life as well, in the real world, but also we are enhancing their agency and helping them to have their voice heard. And they deserve it. They are part of our social world, as I always say.
Hiya! Just quickly, I wanted to ask a favour from all of the listeners and viewers. It would really help this podcast if you subscribe on the platform you are listening or watching on. This will help the Voice of Early Childhood podcast to continue putting out thought-provoking and reflective episodes with a range of guests. And if you are enjoying listening to this podcast, please do share it with someone else who you think would love it too. And of course, as always, we encourage you to share your voice too. If you have reflections, thoughts, and comments, please do share this episode on social media with your comments and tag the Voice of Early Childhood. Let's keep these thought-provoking discussions going. Thank you. I'll let you get back to the episode now. Yes, and they are being then active citizens in society, which is exactly what social sustainability is all about. Well, wider sustainability is all about ensuring that we do support our youngest generations to become active citizens and understand their role and responsibility in the world, in society. And we're really encouraging that from a young age and enabling that from a young age as well, so they feel like they can speak up. I think we were talking about this in the last episode. So, children feel like they can share their voice and they can kind of stand their ground rather than feel like they can't say anything to an authoritative figure, for instance.
Exactly. And it also helps them to communicate as well, to learn how to communicate when trying to resolve conflicts. Which is also very important. So these skills are incredibly important. It's just perhaps we need to provide children with more opportunities. And as I said, not even with more opportunities in terms of activities, but perhaps more modeling, active listening, and yeah, that's
I guess making the most of just day-to-day experiences, really, isn't it? And seeing the value of the everyday as a learning opportunity.
Indeed, and every single minute of it. And of course, parents also play a role, and so society at the end of the day. But if we do not start at school, who will? Education is there, and in fact, education is always placed at the top of the list on possible solutions towards a sustainable world. So yes.
And just kind of reflecting on the skills that we were talking about earlier in terms of when you were given one of the scenarios of children using their critical thinking, and actually they're problem solving at the same time, but also they're using negotiation at the same time. And whilst they're negotiating, they're using empathy, because they need to understand the other person's thinking situation, or they need to put themselves in another person's shoes in order to try and negotiate, rather than just say we're going with my decision. So they need to be open to other people's views and perspectives. So it really makes me think how all of these vital skills are so interlinked, and we can't teach them, support them, encourage them in silos individually. And just looking at your article, you in the critical considerations, you pose the question of how can we integrate negotiation, creative and critical thinking and empathy skills into early childhood education curricula effectively. And I know we already said it's about making the most of day-to-day experiences, but it's potentially also considering what do you have that is planned in your curriculum that does encourage these skills. Is there enough, or do you allow for this to happen, or do you perhaps even allow enough time? Does your curriculum allow enough time to slow down, I guess, and look at these daily routines and situations and experiences and take learning out of them and support children?
Yes, I think especially it depends where about in England you are, but as we are in central London and our children take 4+ assessments, as I was talking in the first podcast that we did together with Sana Clark. Sometimes, unfortunately, we have to focus as educators in so many things, but mainly in academics, just to prepare these children for these 4+ assessments. And perhaps that also give less space to important vital skills such as empathy and critical thinking, negotiation. But we also have to consider that although empathy is inherently exists in children, failure to nurture this ability can also lead to its decline. And again, we are talking about an essential skill that is linked to British values such as respect and tolerance, and is linked to sustainability, and is linked to the real life and to what it is to be part of a community and to be a human being. So I think that, yes, we should perhaps refocus and rethink. And I think that it would be also beneficial to do some training as well for staff members, because we do have plenty of resources in phonics, how to teach phonics, plenty of programs, resources, courses, training, and so in maths area. But because perhaps critical thinking, empathy is not an area of learning in the EYFS, it is mentioned in characteristics of effective learning, but that's how children learn. However, it's not only how children learn, it's what they need to develop, what we need to nurture for the academic success as well. So I think some training will definitely help in different ways that, as you said, different ways where we can make the most of these everyday chances to nurture these skills. At the end of the day, these skills are the ones that enable children to become active agents of change in addressing and challenging unjust power structures and social issues that are linked to sustainability.
And it makes me reflect on whether training is too much focused on what the adult can teach and a bit more like program based rather than what can be nurtured, like you mentioned. And of course there is there's training around I guess a self-regulation potentially, and that's a little bit different than just teaching. That is part of being kind of part of experiences together and responding to the child in the moment. But yeah, just makes me really reflect on training. Like you said, there's so much out there on phonics and maths and things like that, which can be taught and is usually taught by the adult in a more formal way. And do we not focus on these, I guess, soft skills or life skills because we kind of take them for granted? Because they, like you say, children do have empathy naturally, but actually we do need to really nurture this and develop this and extend this and support them with really growing that empathy in different situations, because a lot of the time it doesn't still come naturally. And yeah, if it's not supported, then actually, like you say, children will regress in a way, I guess, almost, if they're not supported.
It will lead to its decline, and we can see this as well, especially in creativity. If you think of creativity, I mean, I'm talking in a very generic way, but creativity is one of those skills that certainly, in average, declines over time, and this is because we are not giving children, we are not nurturing that skill enough. Despite being, as you know, inherently nature to inherently exist to them, you know, is natural to them, is in their nature. So yes, it's very important to nurture these skills, especially because these skills are being labeled as the most important skills to have in sustainability. And in the future, especially not knowing what the future holds for our children, what kind of jobs there will be, and so AI, and so there are different topics that all of them together support the importance of nurturing these skills for the future.
And it's, again, going back to your episode a while back with Zana Clark as well around life skills. It's not about learning those facts. It's about learning those kind of critical thinking, like you were saying, problem solving, innovate, the skills that allow you to be fostering innovation and being open to new ideas. All these various life skills that will then allow you to learn new things, to be able to create new things, create new ideas. And you're not just learning facts. And I think that's what we're constantly trying to move away from. And it seems like it's just been a conversation for so many years and probably decades. But certainly recently, it feels like we're kind of going on and on about this. And we do more of this in early years. We do focus more on life skills in early years, I guess, more so than in primary and secondary education. And then I feel like maybe in higher education, further education, again, it kind of comes back and we kind of lose it in between, you know, those between stages of education, where we do focus on very much kind of subject specific learning, rather than, I guess, what is a little bit more seen as like alternative education, where you follow the interests of the child or student and everything's a little bit more project based, where you can develop all those vital skills that are a bit more subject based, like maths and science and literacy, but you're doing it through a project that is context based and real life, rather than being sat down and being taught by a teacher. And then all these other skills can develop as you're working on the project and your problem solving. That's the kind of that very much is early years, isn't it? In terms of really, well, what many people see as good early years practice. That's what we want to be doing. And for me, in my eyes, that is very much early years practice. It just changes when we get into primary and secondary.
It changes. Unfortunately, it does. But again, as you said, the topic is not quite a hot topic per se. So hopefully things will change, not only in early childhood education, but also in primary and secondary education. I believe it's important to develop the creative and critical thinking skills, but I also think that our focus, perhaps, because I see a lot of problem solving activities. Tell me how you have done, how did you do it, how did you arrive to this? But also it's very important to develop their empathy and compassion skills. I think this is truly significant, especially in social sustainability. And just to give you an example, and I'm going to make it up somehow, let's say that two children from two children, one of them finds a solution. There is no house, and a child decides to build a house out of sticks. So we have child A that has built a house out of sticks using creative and critical thinking, has used sticks, has thought of a structure. Then we see mathematical, logical reasoning as well. So a lot of skills, a lot of areas, lots of skills, but again, creative and critical thinking skills. But then we have child B who hasn't come up with a solution. Now, in this situation, what we see that those skills have helped to find a solution, but child B is still without a house. What child A may need to do, and so what child A may need to do is to ask child B to share the house, because child A can see and can feel that child B is sad because the child B doesn't have a house to stay in. And then child B could also feel empowered enough to ask child A if he could come in the house, because he doesn't have a house and he doesn't know how to build a house out of sticks. So again, we may be able to find solutions to problems, but it's about developing that empathy and that compassion as well. That would be the ultimate solution to social sustainability, not only finding innovation and developing creative and critical thinking and negotiation, but also developing that compassion, that empathy, that thinking of others and acting accordingly.
Yeah, because not everyone will be not everyone's in the privileged situation to even act on their skills necessarily, or have the resources to act on their skills or to problem solving specific things. And if there's even thinking about like natural disasters and things like that, so you may have all the skills in the world, and if you had the resources you could build a house or whatever it may be, or find a solution, but sometimes it's not possible. And like you say, that empathy goes a really long way and makes such a big difference in terms of an equitable society, really.
Yes, that's what is also important. And I try to do this, and not only by exposing them to different scenarios, as you said, there's just people that it's not about the skills, it's just they don't have the resources or even the possibility. So it's good to somehow, one way or the other, of course, in this case, in a safe environment and in a familiar environment, and knowing that they were role playing, but still they could somehow step on other shoes and develop that empathy as well, and perhaps not, as data shows, work more as a collective towards finding a solution and towards inviting others and including others in their play and their solutions. That is what we have seen as well. We've seen in remember last episode we were talking about the water walk.
Yes, yeah.
To find water, we find a child that has found some water. So we have creative and critical thinking skills. But this child decides, and this is the 4th week, to share with other children. Now we see some form of negotiation. We see children asking, "Can I have water?" and other children mirroring this behavior by coming by and asking the same question, or perhaps developing different strategies like let me hold it. This child accepted to share. This child decided to share the water that she found with everyone equally as possible, so to fill every container. But on the other side of the coin, we have other children asking to hold this container or to get this container from the child, and the child saying, no, I will hold it. I will be the one pouring water on you. So we can see that negotiation not only in related to materials or to sharing, but also related to power struggles as well. And this is also something to take into account. We see the child displaying some empathy skills. I know that you don't have water, I'm going to share. And this compassion, I understand we are all part of it, and I found a solution, but the solution is for all the outcome. But I still have to hold the power. I still have to hold the container.
Yeah. And that's so for all of those listeners and viewers, that was the topic of the previous episode on possession as a form of power, one of the previous episodes. So Yeah, definitely a really interesting one to listen to and consider, and how this plays out day to day. And we may often not actually see how obvious it is, but now, like reflecting on Carmela's research, it may be a little bit more evident on just how possession of goods really does give children and adults power, or that feeling of power.
Yeah,
And
sharing
yeah,
is
go on.
often, yeah, it's just the link to that is sharing. The fact of sharing is often seen perhaps as a marker of empathetic or prosocial behavior in young children. That's what we think of as early childhood educators when we see a child sharing, how empathetic. But sharing also makes it is a valuable avenue to explore empathy, therefore. And so this, I would like to mention, Angelica, this will be perhaps not, it will be further explored in the next episode, because next episode we'll talk about perceiving fairness as an act of sharing. And this will link to empathy and compassion, as we talk about now, and so other themes such as possession and of goods, as you mentioned, and see how sharing is linked to empathetic behavior in children.
Well, that'll be interesting to unpick further. So thank you, Carmela, for talking us through this theme from your findings. Really interesting to start making all these links between the different themes and the different aspects of your research, and we can see where we can really start to embed all of this into practice, all the implications for practice as we discussed. So for those who are listening and watching, if you haven't already listened to the previous episodes in this series, you can find them on the Voice of Early Childhood website. The link is in this episode description, and here you will also find Carmela's articles. And of course, you can also search for the Voice of Early Childhood on podcast, streaming platforms, and YouTube. And as Carmela mentioned, the next episode will be on the fifth theme that emerged from research, perceiving fairness as an act of sharing, and really linking that to equality and equity and fairness beyond the act of kindness. So thank you to all of the listeners for tuning in once again, and thank you to Carmela for sharing her research, and we'll hear from you again soon.
Thank you, Angelica.